do, how we work with our customers, and really that's in three different ways. Okay, so folks will subscribe to our research to get a better picture of what digital technology vendors do well, but maybe more importantly, what they don't do so well, to help you select a technology that's going to be the right fit for your unique needs. We also have a product called Real Score, which allows you to benchmark how effective you are with your incumbent technology, as well as your people and your processes. And then you can measure yourselves against your industry peers and then across all other verticals. And working with our analyst team, you can actually develop a strategic roadmap moving forward to see really a game plan on helping yourselves to improve your effectiveness. Finally, we offer consulting work, and we do that in three different ways, actually. We will come on site to help you with a technology selection project. We can also work with you to develop a strategic roadmap. And finally, we do offer one-day on-site workshops, which really can be tailored to however you see fit in terms of the topics that are most important to you. But some examples of this could include how to fix your RFP, or to really build that strategic roadmap around your marketing technology, your employee experience technology, or maybe we can come in and help you to rescue a flailing procurement. So those are a few different ways in which we can come in and work with you in an on-site workshop capacity. What makes us different and unique in the analyst world, and we really haven't seen anyone else that has this model, is we do no work for the vendors that we evaluate. Our only focus is to help our customers, our subscribers, to pick the right technology. And then around the vendors, we don't advise them on the strategy or speak at their junkets, write white papers for them. Our only focus is to help technology users and buyers. And our coverage areas entail both digital workplace and digital marketing technology. And here's our most updated map, where you'll see the addition of our CRM evaluations that'll be published in the next week or so. And you'll notice on the map that digital marketing is on the top, while digital workplace technology is more geared towards the bottom. What we're going to focus on today is that red line on enterprise collaboration and social software. And that's how I'll segue over to Tony and let him take over the presentation.
Great, thanks, Scott. I'm really excited to be here with everyone today. This kind of marries up two topics that are I'm personally just very passionate about. One is social collaboration technology and the promise that that holds within the modern enterprise and the modern digital workplace, as well as what's the right way to select technology. And this is an area that we've been focused on now for 2 decades, really building a more of an agile methodology. So going to be covering both of those things. And I want to tell you a little story about, I founded Real Story Group, originally CMS Watch, in 2001, really in reaction to this. This is obviously a takeoff on the infamous Magic Quadrant. And I was working for a systems integrator, and we were implementing some of these tools, including some early collaboration tools, and really very frustrated with our experience as implementers relative to what we're reading in the analyst marketplace. And I thought, there had to be a better way of selecting tools rather than just focusing on what was in, the mystical right-hand quadrant. So the agenda today is we're going to look at really not just the digital workplace tech landscape, although that will kind of shape things, but really do a deep dive on social collaboration tools. And then the second half of the briefing will be, what's the best way to select these technologies? If you need some new tools or you want to replace or supplement what you have, what's the best way to do that? So here's a traditional look at the digital workplace. It's an enterprise architecture diagram. Some people call this a layer cake type diagram. These are important. As a former enterprise architect myself, I've made these. It's useful to look at what you have in terms of layers. The problem with this approach is that it's not sufficient for what you need. It's sort of the enterprise looking at itself. So what you really want is more of to complement that is an employee-centric view of the digital workplace, where the employee is at the center. They have particular needs that you can see in the white and the red areas. And then the key thing there is, yes, you need business platforms and enterprise services in the gray and the purple circles respectively, but the key thing is specific applications. What are the specific applications ideally owned by a business product manager that's going to drive efficiency, effectiveness, recognition, growth, and so forth? And so it's a sort of application-specific approach that really guides our whole approach to the digital workplace in general, and the and social collaboration in particular. And so that then drove us to say, well, what are the different applications and what are the different sorts of tools that make up the digital workplace? And so we came up with what we call the MPEX 200. This is Employee Experience Technology Landscape. You can get access to this diagram at the URL you see at the bottom, realstoregroup.com/MPEX. And the point here is that these are the 200 most important solutions from about 135 different vendors that together make up the employee digital experience. And so in many of these cases, particularly as these are increasingly cloud-based solutions, you can often be limited in terms of your capability for actually, modifying them or significantly adjusting them. So at some level, these vendors are driving the employee experience, and to some extent determining whether that's a positive or a negative experience. So then, it's not a short jump from there to say, okay, well then really getting the right vendor and getting the right fit is going to be really critical for employee UX success. It's not going to be the only thing that's going to matter. Of course, you've got a lot of work to do, but we think it's foundational to sort of pick the right technologies. And across the enterprise, social collaboration landscape, you've got obviously a lot of different choices. There's platform vendors, including Microsoft, IBM, and Oracle. And many organizations kind of hinge or pivot off that. That does make sense, but we also increasingly find that across that landscape of 200 different solutions, more and more of what constitutes a digital workplace, and certainly social collaboration, may come from other sorts of vendors. Of course, as we go to the right, there's alternatives to some of the platform vendors in terms of major suites such as Drupal, Google, Jive, SAP, and others. And then a whole series of smaller suites. Some of these are sort of intranet in a box platforms, very attractive for mid-size firms. And then enterprise social layers, increasingly important. You could think of Yammer and Workplace there, but certainly also Salesforce Chatter, Citrian, TIBCO, and others, to try to overlay some of your major collaboration and other line of business tools. And then you have some specialist players. You could think of Workplace as a kind of a specialist communications and conversation zone. Certainly Slack become nearly ubiquitous, Harmony and others that provide very specialized sort of services. So the point here is that, once you get beyond, say, Office 365, the Oracle suite, the IBM suite, there's a whole set of alternatives here. In the typical digital workplace, going to have a number of different tools, and you may need multiple tools to succeed at enterprise collaboration and social networking as well. So as you're looking at this technology and your needs, very often there's a temptation to look at it in terms of features. What features are there? And so this then leads to feature checklists, and we do this in our research as well. I think this is a view of Yammer. How do we evaluate it across these different services like productivity services, collaboration, and then enterprise services, which are really important if you're going to roll these things out across multiple departments. So, features are important, but in our view, they're not really foundational, right? So that you need to know what a tool actually does and doesn't do, what are some of the strengths and weaknesses as far as things like lifecycle management and scalability and so forth. Okay, so that's important, but you shouldn't use it as the key driver for your selection. I'll explain why in a second here. What you really want to try to do is solve the social collaboration gap, that at an executive level, you have aspirations. We need to collaborate more. I've just read in Harvard Business Review, the companies that collaborate more have a 30% higher market cap or what have you. And of course, that makes sense. But at a staff level, where the people at the coalface, what they really want are more instrumental. They have more instrumental concerns, such as, we just need the right answers. I need to find the right person to work with. I need to finish this project faster. I need better information in the context of this particular task. I need to find the right team to help complete this particular activity, so on and so forth. So they have very instrumental needs. The way that you bridge that gap is through specific social collaboration business applications. And it's these business applications then that should drive your roadmap. And from the purposes of, from our purposes of evaluating these technologies, it's the business applications that are sort of the foundational lens by which you evaluate vendors. So, there's formal knowledge. So we look at this, there's a whole arc of participation here where you have more formal and structured, more collaboration-oriented applications that you see in the upper left, all the way down to more networking-oriented and kind of informal and unstructured applications in the lower right. And so you have knowledge bases, external collaboration, project collaboration, team communications, increasingly important. This is obviously what Slack and Teams and others are trying to address. Communities of practice. Many people believe, and we tend to agree, this is the sharp end of the social sphere. Innovation support and ideation, some tremendous use cases there. Enterprise conversation, social Q&A, which we're now calling more like answer engines. A lot of interesting applications there and a lot of value in a more dynamic way than, say, a traditional knowledge base. Expertise location, really critical. What a lot of people want to use an ESN or enterprise social network for don't always work particularly well for that application, but that's what employees are trying to do, is reach out and find the right person. And then the trickiest one, and in some ways maybe the toughest one, is to try to socialize existing work streams to humanize legacy applications. Some vendors like SAP and TIBCO and others are working on this. I'd say the progress is relatively slow, but the point here is that these are key applications, and what you want to do both when you're evaluating technologies and thinking about driving business value is to focus in terms of these applications rather than features. So what's interesting is that if you take this approach, you say, all right, well then let's start evaluating these tools based on this sort of application view of the world. This really sort of tells you what these tools are all about. So let's look again at Workplace by Facebook, which is the sample in our research stream. So you can download this for free and read our evaluation. But this comes from our evaluation. And what's interesting about Workplace is, it's got a lot of really good street cred right now. Clearly, it's a system that your employees, were you to adopt it, are going to pick up and probably adopt very readily initially. But then when you look at what is it that they would actually do with it, where would the business value come from? And the reality is that Facebook really only touches on kind of 3 applications and really does only one of them very well. And it really targets conversation and news. Now, conversation and news is important, but it is, in some organizations, kind of a lubricant to getting work done, as opposed to, actually more sorts of practical forms of social collaboration. So this doesn't mean you shouldn't license Workplace by Facebook. It does this particular, it executes this particular scenario reasonably well, but you need to understand that it's kind of a one-trick pony, right? And so forewarned is forearmed, obviously. And so the idea here is that not just about Workplace, but in terms of any technology that you're looking at, but particularly social collaboration technology, taking more of a business application approach. What business applications does that tool actually target, and how well does it execute on it? Helps you understand where it's going to fit within your enterprise, and also helps you understand what is the short list of tools you should be looking at when you're trying to do something like improve team communication, or socialize an existing work stream, or support your communities of practice. Communities of practice is an important one because that's an area where Office 365 in general and SharePoint specifically have traditionally really lagged. And so we're seeing a lot of heartburn among certainly our subscriber base of large enterprises, where communities of practice are very important for their digital workplace, but they're finding that Office 365 isn't getting them there, and they often have to then supplement what Microsoft is delivering. And of course, you want to look at the broader vendor product ecosystem. So not just looking at the scenarios and business applications, but also, the larger customer community, software partners, services partners, and some of the vendor intangibles and vendor trends as well, and what are some of the risks there. So once again, if we look at Facebook Workplace, the product has a lot to say for itself. It's fairly modern. It's relatively good value for the money. At this point, we have a little bit of doubts about the vendor and the staying power of Facebook in the enterprise segment, yet to be proven. And so, again, that doesn't mean you shouldn't go with them, but it's a risk you'll want to understand and mitigate. And then likewise, in terms of the ecosystem, right now is very, very thin. And so that also is a potential weakness for Facebook Workplace. So you want to look at not just the business applications, but also some of these strategic intangibles, which are really important because your switching costs here can be pretty high. Once you acculturate your employees to a particular application, then and they obviously enter a lot of data, then there's a serious risk of lock-in. So you want to just make sure what are the long-term implications of partnering with that vendor. Okay. So that's the social collaboration tech landscape, and we're about halfway through, and I'm going to just pause here and remind you that if you have any questions or comments or anything you disagree with or something that resonates with you, feel free to use the questions tab in your Go to webinar control panel. All right, so now let's look at how do we go about selecting. Let's say we do find that communities of practice are really important. We don't have a really good digital solution for that. Or we want to address enterprise news and conversations or socializing a legacy process or any one of those 11 or 12 applications. How do we go about selecting the technology that's going to work well for us? So first, I'm going to give you some advice about what not to do, which is just to default to an incumbent just because it's lying around, right? You may have a drill press, but that drill press has a particular set of usages and it might not work in every case. So just because you have something lying around doesn't mean that you should use it for that particular purpose. Instead, what you want to try to do is find a tool that's fit for purpose. Now, you should definitely evaluate the incumbent and include it in terms of your evaluation process. And obviously, there's going to be trade-offs, and in some ways, it may prove more attractive from a financial or other perspective. But on the other hand, if it doesn't really address the business need effectively, then you've created a problem. And there are costs to this sort of, suboptimal solution. In some cases, it can actually be catastrophic, where you have the wrong solution and it ends up causing you a real problem. You say, well, yeah, we already had it, but still, it ended up sort of blowing up in our face. So don't just default to the incumbent just because it's lying around. I think the other thing that we tend to do is put a lot of information into spreadsheets and then just sort of throw it out there and hope and pray that it's all going to work. And, instead, what I'm going to suggest is a more agile approach to technology selection. So hopefully you're all incorporating Agile into your business processes and your technology implementations as well. I'm going to suggest you also sort of incorporate it upstream, where you're identifying external suppliers, whether they're software vendors or consultancies. What you see on the right is a cover of a book that my colleague Jared and I are putting out. It'll be available for pre-order in the next couple of weeks. We'll let you know. Can actually get the hard copies in August, so very excited about it. This encapsulates our sort of agile methodology we've developed over the last 16 years. But the key things we get into in the book is the importance of really putting together a multidisciplinary selection team, doing a test-based process as opposed to a features-based process, and then iterate through the process and adapt the process to really figure out through a hands-on process what you need rather than a kind of more abstract waterfall type approach. So you definitely want to build an interdisciplinary selection team. So when it comes to social collaboration, on the one hand, you don't just want the different business units or say the KM team just going off and selecting something on their own. On the other hand, you don't want the converse to that, which is IT sort of going off and sort of saying, well, this worked for us, so therefore it's going to work for you, or we already have a license to Office 365, or we already have a license to Atlassian, so we're just going to throw that out there and see what happens. Instead, you want to build a team that has both IT and business stakeholders from across the enterprise, including knowledge management and others, to ideally led by a business leader to try to come together and take more of a 360 view of what these tools do and what constitutes a good fit. Then the most important thing is you want to go through a testable process. So we're big believers in RFPs so long as they're done right and they're highly structured. And if you're an RSG subscriber, feel free to reach out to us. We've got some RFP examples and some templates. I'm happy to review your RFPs as well. And they really help you learn through the process too. Because again, the point here is iteration and learning based on your responses. Then you may invite some vendors back for vendor demos. For those demos, you don't have them do generic demos of what they can do, but actually execute your particular use cases in your applications. And that allows you then to compare them head to head. But then the last and most important thing I want to leave you with is the importance of doing a bake-off. For 2 finalists, make sure that you evaluate them head to head where you're actually getting hands-on with the tool. It's amazing to us how many enterprises buy technology without ever testing it. Something you would never do with a 20,000 euro car, which is just to go buy it without ever trying it out. There's no Teslas out there in the software space. I can tell you that. You definitely, particularly since you're buying this for your colleagues, you definitely want to have them try it before you buy it. And there's a lot of interesting structured ways to do pilots. Again, if you're an RSG subscriber, feel free to reach out to us, and we can help you through that whole process. But the point is that it's a testable process. So leave your spreadsheets at home of long requirements checklists. The vendors have seen them. They can check all the boxes. There are ways of addressing technology needs around social collaboration. Could be things like integration with identity management, integration with your HR systems. You want to shape those not as what questions, but how questions. How will you integrate with our Active Directory forest? How will you integrate with our cloud-based HR system? Here's the elements we want to expose from that HR system in our social collaboration space, and vice versa. How would you do that, right? But even better yet, though, is to develop actual user stories. A lot of different ways of doing this. We have some specific methodologies around this, but the user story should really be front and center in the core of your whole solicitation. Adapt them as you go from an RFP to a demo and then to the POC round, so that by the end you're really clear about what it is that the technology is delivering for you, and you've gotten hands-on with it so that you can actually simulate what life would be like. And then you've got decisions to make, and it really comes down to fit. There's technology fit, but even more importantly at the top is business fit, scenario fit. Is it actually going to deliver on the applications that we need? But then we mentioned before, there's partner intangibles, and of course value fits into the equation. So at the end of the day, there's usually no perfect solution, but there is an ideal solution. And that's really what this is about, is what's the best fit for you that's going to give your team a chance to succeed. This isn't going to guarantee that you're successful, but it does, by getting the best fit that you can, it bodes well then for getting quickly to an effective pilot and getting long-term business value from this new technology. So I wish you success in your product selections. If there's anything we can do to help you, please reach out. I'll point you in particular to that first URL where you can download a free sample of our research. Scott, maybe you can fill in some details here while I investigate what questions have come in.
Absolutely. Thanks, Tony. And one other thing I'd recommend is taking a look at some of the tools available on our website. Those also can be tried out on your own. It's just realstorygroup.com/tools, where you can utilize the Real Quadrant application and in real time to compare the vendors side by side and really assess your particular environment right now with our Real Score application, and get going in terms of how you can measure yourselves against your industry peers. Moving forward, we have another research briefing scheduled next week. It'll be on Wednesday at the same time, July 19th. It'll be discussing the latest update to the vendor map that we led off with, and what does that mean to you as a technology user and buyer. So certainly hope you can join us for that. And as Tony mentioned, please feel free to email us, explore@realstorygroup.com, if we can provide you with some additional details about our offerings. With that, Tony, any questions in the queue?
Yeah, so one is, our enterprise has licensed Office 365. We have SharePoint on-prem. We're transitioning to Office 365. We're finding it's not filling all of our social application needs, as you say. What are our alternatives? Well, you have a lot of different alternatives based on the particular applications. So if we go and we look at Office 365 against that matrix of 11 things, nominally Microsoft might have something to say about 8 or 9 of them, but it's probably going to only be effective for, as you know, for 2 or 3. So there's a couple different approaches here. One is to try to supplement SharePoint with something that kind of, or Office 365 with something that kind of works on top of it. A little bit less mature in the Office 365 space right now, but it's coming, particularly around things like communities of practice and social Q&A. The other thing that we've seen organizations do very successfully is to sort of complement Office 365. In other words, to license something kind of adjacent to it, and then integrate at the identity level, integrate in terms of sometimes message streams and those sorts of things, a little bit like Microsoft itself has done with Yammer. And we've seen some good success with that. It's not always a slam dunk, because there are obviously integration issues and guidance in terms of what to do with your staff. So there's in terms of education and supporting people through that whole process, there's obviously work to do, but we also know that many of these specialized applications can bring real immediate value. So you shouldn't necessarily discount them and just try to, jerry-rig something in Office 365. The other question was around what we think the future of Jive, now that they've been taken private again. And I think this is actually probably a good thing for Jive. I think that, they were struggling to some extent to deal with the Wall Street expectations in terms of having a higher growth rate than maybe they were able to achieve. I think they've done some good things in recent years. And I think this will allow them hopefully to reset a little bit. My wish for the Jive licensees is that their new owners have a little bit more of a longer term perspective than the public markets do. It's obviously something to watch, but I don't think that it should be a deal killer in terms of considering the technology, because Jive does do certain things that Microsoft, Google, Oracle, IBM, Drupal, and others don't do particularly well. And so it definitely should be under consideration for certain shortlists, depending on what your application is. Okay, so with that, we've reached the bottom of the half hour. So I wanted to thank everyone again for participating, and look forward to staying engaged with you and catching up the next time. For Real Story Group, this is Tony Byrne signing off.